Hi. Thank you. I am from Los Angeles. I'm a writer-producer. I'm a partner in a company called Royal Viking Entertainment, and we produce mostly offbeat biopics. And yet I just lied when I said that, because our next film is called Black and Blue, starring Naomi Harris from Moonlight, which some of you may be familiar with from this area, seeing as the people involved in that film were from the Florida area. But our latest film is called Black and Blue. It comes out from Screen Gems on October 25th. Go see it so I can pay for my daughter's college. And we're very excited about that film. It will definitely be playing here. It's going to be on about 3,000 screens across the country. And then we have two other films coming up. One of them is called What Is Life Worth, which is a true story of Ken Feinberg, who volunteered to be the special master of the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. That is a film that we've co-produced with Michael Sugar Productions. They produced Spotlight, and that film stars Stanley Tucci and Michael Keaton, and that will be coming out next year. And then I was just, as you saw me so rudely on my phone, texting while I was getting introduced, we just finally closed a deal and are going into production on one of my students' films called The Startup, which is a really funny comedy that will hopefully be coming out at the end of next year. So we're doing a lot of different things. My job within our company is to work with the writers. So in other words, when someone comes to our company with an idea, or maybe they found an article about a real life person, or they have their own spec script that we're interested in, and we enter into an agreement with that person and decide to produce their film, I am then the person that works with the writer. So this is a momentous occasion for me because I'm actually dressed and I've taken a shower, because usually I work from my home office on Skype. I do about 90% of my work online, meeting with writers and giving them notes either from the studio or from actors or from directors or whomever, and then I guide the writers through the process. I also consult with Disney Feature Animation and also with Pixar Animation Studios, two little places that some of you might have heard of. They make pretty good movies, and I do a lot of workshops for them where basically I teach or help their story departments understand story better, which sounds like an oxymoron, right? You would think that the story department would understand story, but it's always good to get a refresher and to kind of clear things up. So I do a lot of work for them as well. And I do a lot of speaking engagements, such as this, appear at film festivals, et cetera. And also run a consulting company called PROPATH Screenwriting, where we consult with writers that are looking to move their careers forward. If I am an open book, so in other words, and much to my wife's chagrin, I am going to put my email address up here. I know, she's like, every time I do one of these things, she's like, did you put your email up for everybody? I'm like, yes. So it's basically my name, tim.albaugh@gmail.com. And I am all about, and this is going to sound like cliche, but I'm all about giving back. I wouldn't have my career if one of my professors at UCLA 30 years ago, yes, 30 years ago, didn't refer me to my first agent. And I've always been super thankful for that. And I've always been a big champion of new writers. We're always looking for new voices. And I've been instrumental in launching dozens of writers' careers, either through classes at UCLA or through my consulting work or just through speaking at workshops and meeting people. So I am an open book. One thing I'll tell you right now, though, I can't read your script. So don't email me with your script attached to your email. I will delete it without even reading it. Legally, I can't do it. So usually when I get involved with a writer, it's through a referral or obviously through agents and managers. That's not to say that I'm not approachable, I'm not accessible. So in other words, if I say something tonight that you get home later tonight and you're like, I don't really understand what he meant by this or that, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to respond and answer your questions. It may take a couple of days, but I will definitely get back in touch with you. And if you have questions about the business, a lot of times when I'm dealing with new writers and they're starting to talk to producers and they're starting to make deals and they're uncomfortable and they maybe feel like that they're getting screwed over, I encourage people to email me and I will answer any questions you may have on that front. So by all means, take advantage of me. I am a resource. That did not sound right, but you know what I mean. How many of you are writers? Those of you who aren't writers, Why are you here? I'm kidding. Thought it was something else. No, I'm assuming you're film buffs, film fans, actors maybe. Do we have any actors? Sweet, I like it. Oh, you're a hyphenate because you put your hand up for writing too. You're a double threat, I like that. So good, good. The movie business is insane. The TV business is insane. And it's an insanely great time to be in both of those businesses. And I'll tell you, well, actually, and I want this to be very interactive. So I'm not here to just lecture you for 2 hours. I want this to be a workshop. People are already asking questions. Hold on just a second. By all means, if I say something that doesn't make sense, you need clarification, just raise your hand and we'll clear it up. I'm going to ask you some questions. I want it to be very interactive. It's not going to just be me lecturing. Another thing I'll say too, I'm going to use some clips because we're talking about the first 10 minutes of films / scripts. And some of the clips may have foul language in them. There's no nudity, but there is some foul language. If that's offensive to you, I apologize, and I can tell you when we're going to show it if you want to step out of the room. But yeah, I want this to be a very interactive experience for you. And we'll go close to 8:30. I want to save a little time for questions at the end as well. But yeah, I want you to get out of this what you need to get out of it. But we're going to talk mostly about just the first 10 minutes. But getting back to the idea of an insanely good time of being in the business, a couple things you should know or you may already know. How many of you have heard of a streaming service called Disney Plus? Okay, some of you do. How many of you may or may not know that Disney Plus is going to be producing hundreds of hours of original material for their new streaming platform? Yes, Disney Plus will be producing numerous live-action Star Wars shows. What's that? Oh, here we go. Yeah, exactly. They're spending billions of dollars. Apple, how many of you are aware of the fact that Apple is coming out with their own streaming service? You may have seen some of the previews for some of their shows already, including a show that's kind of like a broadcast news type show set in a newsroom with Steve Carell and, darn it, why are the two actresses' names escaping me? Pardon me? Jennifer Aniston and from Big Little Lies, Reese Witherspoon. Thank you very much. Yeah, they are not just fly-by-night actors. Those are A-list movie stars. Apple is spending $6 billion with a B to acquire new material. That should send a chill down your spine. That's crazy. So, of course, everybody else is jumping into that game too. As sure you've all seen already, BET is starting their own streaming service, and they are producing shows from producers such as Will Packer and other large-scale, big Hollywood producers. My point is, there's a ton of opportunities for writers right now. A ton of opportunities. It's insane how many opportunities there are. I wish I was 30 years younger. In fact, I kind of jokingly say to my students at UCLA, if you can't get a job when you get out of school, then there must be something wrong with you, because it's just a golden age. It's going to be amazing. And so that's super exciting. But what that also means is a lot of people are jumping into the game who probably shouldn't be in the game, if that makes sense, right? Everybody is like, ooh, there's more opportunities, so I'm going to jump into there. And let's face it, there's a lot of crappy material out there, right? How many of you read screenplays? Those of you who are writers, you've read some screenplays, I'm sure, right? It's a little more difficult to get our hands on those scripts now in terms of just being casual observers on the internet, but you can find screenplays to read, and I would even argue as a professional producer, even scripts coming from professional writers, I'd say only about 10% of them are any good. It's really sad. And here's the thing, I keep going on this kind of 10 idea, right? First 10, 10%, et cetera, people will only read, and when I say people, maybe I shouldn't call them people, producers, studio executives, agents, managers, we're really only gonna read about the first 10 pages of your script, okay? Why is that? Why do you think that's the case?
Because it should hook you by that time. If it hasn't, forget it, it's not worth it.
Yeah, general ideas, you should know, and again, I should preface that everything I'm going to talk about tonight applies to Hollywood films, but also independent films. And I've chosen 4 different samples to watch that are wildly different from each other. And what you're going to find is that they all do the same thing, but they do it in different ways. So yeah, you basically have about 10 minutes to grab somebody. And what I mean by grab is not only have a hook, but also to give us a sense of what the story is, who the characters are, et cetera, and we'll break that down a little more closely. There's so much to read and not enough time to do it. So if somebody doesn't get what the movie is in the first 10 pages, they're probably not going to read anymore. I know the mandate in our company is if you don't have an idea of who the movie's about and what the story is, or at least a hint of what the story is in the first 10 minutes, then you're free to not read any further. That sucks, huh? For those of you who are writers, you're like, damn, that really sucks because I spent a long time writing this 100-page screenplay, right? And why wouldn't they want to read every single word that I write? Because there's 5,000 other people behind you wanting to do the same thing. And you get that, I'll get right with you. You get that one shot of making that impression. So, but the problem is too, is then what happens? What do you think the extreme reaction to that is? People just keep working on those 10 pages over and over and over again. In fact, I'll meet people at events and I'll chat with them and then I'll run into them 6 months later at a different event and they're still working on that first act. Yeah, it's pretty sad. But such is the case, right? You had a question?
Do people ever send in like the first 10 pages as like an audio file?
No. Here's the thing, and that's a great question. Don't be gimmicky. That's a gimmick. That's like, why would I only want to listen to the first 10 pages of your script? That means you've got to have really great actors, and if I'm not seeing them, I'm already like, what a pain in the ass. I don't want to do that. I wouldn't do that. And we can talk about other ways to kind of break in. But no, you want to follow, there's norms, and you want to follow those norms. I appreciate the fact that people want to think outside the box. I'll tell you one thing, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never had anybody say, can we do that? So that's intriguing, so I like that. You're thinking outside the box. But I wouldn't do that. Because what that says to me is, well, the rest of the script must suck if she didn't want to send me the entire script read by professional actors. See what I'm saying? Like, it's like, well, what's wrong with the rest of the script if they only want to send me the first 10 minutes? So you want to send the whole thing, okay? And we can talk about those kind of things as well. But those first 10 minutes are so important. They really are. In fact, my producing partner would argue that the first 10 words you use are the most important words in your script. So we're going to talk about those things. So you said a hook. So I'd like to talk for about 20 minutes or so about some of the elements of what should be in the first 10 pages, and then we'll actually watch some samples of first 10. Everybody get my email? Okay. I did the same thing in my talk at University of Tampa last night, and my ex-student who hosted me, she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, your email box is going to be so full. And I'm like, no, there's no reason to apologize. I'm the one who gave him my email. But yeah, my email box was totally full this morning. I must have got 15 emails from people. Yeah?
Hi, is there any way just move it a little bit over just so we can see it?
Yeah, sure. And I'll remind, or I'll say it over and over again so you'll be able to hear it and write it down too. Is that a little better?
Much better.
Yeah, and we'll take care of you, don't worry. Okay, so some basic tenets of screenwriting and writing in particular. Those of you who haven't read a script before, but you're interested in movies, I would recommend you read some scripts. They're weird. They're not written like anything would be written normally, so to speak. There's a very specific format for what a screenplay should look like. And we operate on the idea, as does everybody pretty much in the commercial film industry, working on an idea of a 3-act structure, okay? At UCLA, we ask our incoming M.F.A. students to read 2 books. Those books are Aristotle's Poetics, which is all about structure and is an excellent sleep aid, and Lajos Egri's Art of Dramatic Writing, which was a book written probably 50 years ago by a gentleman named Lajos Egri. E-G-R-I is his last name if you're interested. And it's all about character and theme. And then we marry those 2 things, okay? But we definitely act on the idea that all movies have a 3-act structure, basically a beginning, middle, and an end, right? Everything has a structure. That's the other thing too. I love it when I have students who are like, well, I'm gonna break all those rules and I'm not gonna have a structure to my movie. And I say, good luck to you. Everything has a structure. This event has a structure. I got introduced, I'm gonna talk, you're gonna ask questions. Your day has a structure, right? You get up, go to work, go to bed. Your life has a structure, right? You're born, you live, you die. Everything has 3 acts. Commercials have 3 acts, jokes have 3 acts, scenes even have 3 acts. So everything has a beginning, middle, and an end. And in the first act of the movie, you're setting up everything that is ordinary. You are setting up the character's ordinary existence. How many of you have studied Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces, right? Famously brought probably to light to everybody when George Lucas's Star Wars came out, and he talked a lot about how he was influenced by that. And we do teach that a lot at UCLA, and the idea being that the first act is the ordinary world, the second act is the extraordinary world, and the third act is the resolution of those 2 things colliding, okay? Beginning, middle, end. I'm giving you a quick screenplay structure 101. We would normally spend 2 years teaching this. We're gonna do it in about 8 minutes. So your first act is usually about 30 minutes long, okay? Again, I'm talking feature films, not television, feature films. So your first act's gonna be about 30 minutes long, which is 30 pages of script, okay? Some are shorter. If you're watching a Judd Apatow movie, it's a little longer. His comedies tend to run about 2.5 hours. But you usually want to fall in that kind of 30-page range, okay? And within those first 30 minutes, just Chris, chat, sorry, Ben.
And within the first 30 pages, is that descriptions as well?
Yeah, it's everything.
Or, setting the scene? Or...
It's everything, yep. So in those first 30 pages, you need to set up all the characters and the situation and present what we call the center question. And the center question is the plot, basically. And you want that center question to be tangible, something that can be filmed. So for example, how many of you, there's a little film called Armageddon. How many seen Armageddon? All right, what do you think the center question of Armageddon is? What's that? Yeah, well, they stopped the meteor from hitting Earth, right? It's tangible, I can film it, it's real, okay? You don't want your center question to be, I want to be happy. Why do you think that's a bad center question? It's vague, it's hard to film, but even more specifically, what makes me happy is completely different from what's going to make you happy. So there's no common ground. Yet I think we can all agree that when we see a meteor get stopped from hitting Earth, we can all agree that they stopped hitting the meteor. They stopped the meteor, right? So you want it to be tangible. Yes?
What about Woody Allen?
Whole different ballgame. So the question was, what about Woody Allen? What about Woody Allen? But obviously, there are some situations that don't follow certain rules. Woody Allen makes up his own rules. He works outside the studio system and makes his own films the way he wants to make them. A lot of things that I'm talking about here today is assuming the majority of you are outsiders wanting to get in. Is that correct, I would say? There's gatekeepers. Who are those gatekeepers? I'll tell you exactly who those gatekeepers are. My 2 interns who are really angry. And why are they angry? Because they're writers and they think they're better than every other writer that gets submitted to us. So you're not writing to get me to like your script. You're writing to get that pissed off grad student who's working for me for free, well, for school credit, but she's working for me and he's working for me, and their job, they're the gatekeeper. They're the person that stands between you and access to me. And I know that's bass-ackwards. That sucks. But that's the nature of the business. I don't have time to read the 400 scripts a month that probably come into our company. I don't. I can't. I'm too busy working with the writers who are actually producing their films. So you need interns to read for you. And then those interns go on to other things. Obviously, they're using it as a stepping stone. They're learning. We're letting them sit in on meetings. They're learning a lot. It's another school for them, basically. But that's the person who decides whether or not your script gets to my cluttered desktop. Okay? Does that make sense? I mean, it makes sense in terms of me explaining it. It makes 0 sense in terms of logicalness in the world. Okay? But that's just the nature of the beast. Those interns have read Sid Field, they've read McKee, they've read Truby, they've read all the books, and they've probably gone to every seminar, and they have a template of things that they're looking for within the script. Okay? Now, I don't say this to bum you out or piss you off, although that should be your initial reaction. I say this to empower you, for you to understand that this is a craft. It is a craft with specific guidelines, and I don't like to call them rules, but I would say patterns. And we're going to look at some of those patterns tonight. Okay? Everybody clear on that? So in those first 10 minutes, you've got to do what? What would you think should be done in those first 10 minutes to grab the reader? What's that? Okay, so you want to, here I'm going to write this as best I can. So you want to hook the audience. The audience, let's just say, is the reader. Okay? So let's hook the audience. Woo, that is a strong smelly marker. Woo! Nice. All right. Okay, so what do you think a good hook would be? Don't do that at an auction. I would have sold $1 million painting to you. You did your glasses like that. I thought you were putting up your hand to ask a question. What do you think a good hook would be? Anybody? What's the latest film you've seen?
A dead body.
A dead body? Oh, I thought you were saying that was the name of the film you saw. Okay, so a murder. Okay, so an action can be a hook. Pardon me? Let's be a little more specific. Like, what's the event that hooks the audience?
An accident.
Pardon me?
An accident.
Okay, so an action which could be a murder,
Finding a criminal.
an accident,
A memory?
a funeral. I wouldn't say a memory because a memory is passive. Pardon me? A wedding? Okay, so some kind of big event. Jaws. How many of you have seen Jaws? What's the hook in that movie? Naked woman gets eaten by a shark. Right? You miss, here's the thing, and this is what we say in our company. If I want my audience, if they miss the first 5 minutes of the movie, to be confused. Think about it. If you saw Jaws and you didn't see the first 5 minutes, you'd be like, why are they so hell-bent on catching a shark? Right? For those of you who've seen Jaws, would it have been a better opening to meet the sheriff in a meeting? Right? How many of you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? What's that opening hook?
That finding that going through the cave and grabbing everything.
Yep. So it's an action event, but also I would argue that the hook of Raiders of the Lost Ark as well is a character. It is Indiana Jones. It is his movie. In fact, and this is going to sound really weird, but if you watch that film, and the film opens and we have the iconic Paramount logo, right? And those who are familiar with the Paramount logo, it's basically a mountain with some stars around the top of it, right? And that logo appears on the screen, and then suddenly Indiana Jones steps in front of the mountain and completely eclipses the mountain. He's larger than life, which is what you want your main character to be no matter what. Now, that's a whole nother workshop that could take hours, and talking about character, but you want your character to deserve a movie. Now, I would argue that Moonlight and Little, he also is a big character, but in a very different way. Okay? So think about Raiders of the Lost Ark. For those of you who've seen it, we establish Indiana Jones through action, and that's how you want to reveal your characters, is through what they do, or what people say about them, or what they say. How many of you have written novels and then tried to write a screenplay? Tough, huh? But it is completely different. Because in a novel, what can you do in a novel? You can go inside your protagonist's head. You can tell us what they're thinking. You can tell us everything about them. In a movie, you have to show us. It's all external. You can't write in a screenplay, Susie stands at the window looking at the traffic below, thinking about her prom date from 25 years ago, wondering what he's doing with his life now. Why can't you write that in a screenplay? How the hell am I going to know that looking at Susie? Unless there's a thought bubble above her head. or she texts it to somebody, which we're actually going to show a sample from a Netflix film that uses social media brilliantly, because that's a big part of our lives now. And I can tell you how many screenplays I read where people are texting each other like crazy. It doesn't work. Don't do it. I'm going to show you a sample that does though. Yes?
What about voiceover?
I mean, you can use voiceover. Sure. I mean, if you think about Field of Dreams, we were discussing this last night in one of the classes at University of Tampa. How many of you have seen Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner? I'm dating myself here, obviously. I mean, the opening 5 minutes of Field of Dreams is basically a montage, and Kevin Costner's character is narrating the montage, and he's telling us his entire life story. And he talks a little bit about his relationship with his dad, and then at the end of the montage and the end of the voiceover, because it's all in voiceover, he says, "My name is Bob," or whatever his name was in the movie. I'm 37 years old, I own a farm, I'm married, I've got a kid, and until the day I heard the voice, I'd never done a crazy thing in my life. Boom, there's a thunderclap, and then we hear the voice. What does the voice say? If you build it, he will come. Right? That's great use of voiceover. And the one thing that they actually trick us with in all of that is if you look back at that movie and you look at that montage is all about his dad. Spoiler alert, who steps out of the cornfield onto the baseball field at the end of the movie? His dad. Which is another thing that you have to think about in those first 10 minutes, which is the beginning of the movie is the promise of the end. So in Jaws, shark eats woman, end of movie, man kills shark. How's that for a pitch? Beginning of the movie sets up the end. Okay, how many of you have seen Seven? Brad Pitt. Ooh, a lot of people. I love it. There's some sick people in here. I like it. My kind of people. I love Seven. Great movie. David Fincher. Look at David Fincher. What a career, right? But if you recall, those of you who've seen Seven, we introduced the two characters, Morgan Freeman's character, Brad Pitt's character. We throw them together. They go to a murder scene. And at the end, they already are at odds, because movies are all about conflict. And at the end of those first 10 minutes, they've gone to their first murder scene together. They're at odds. They're arguing. And Morgan Freeman's character says to Brad Pitt's character at the end of that discussion, he says, because Morgan Freeman's only got a week before he's retiring, hence 7 days. It's called Seven. 7 deadly sins, 7 murders, 777s all over the place, right? Morgan Freeman says to Brad Pitt, if you do one thing this week, I want you to listen to me. For those of you who've seen the movie, what does Brad Pitt not do at the end of the movie? Listen. He does not listen. And what happens because of that? Spoiler alert, I won't tell you, but it has something to do with Gwyneth Paltrow losing her head. Okay? See how the beginning of the movie is the promise of the end? So, if you're writing a Woody Allen movie, which you're not going to do, the beginning of a Woody Allen movie is usually, well, the first 5 minutes are credits, and then it's him walking around talking to somebody. That's okay. I mean, Woody Allen, personal life aside, I'm a big fan of Annie Hall. I think it's a great movie. Okay? So, different strokes, different folks, different things. You can write that movie as an outsider, but it's going to be a little more difficult for you to break through with that. Because, again, the gatekeepers are expecting certain things. Okay? So I wanted to get back to Raiders of the Lost Ark for a minute, and that in terms of character, we're establishing his character in those first 5 minutes. If you recall, he's the best at what he does, right? Remember we said larger than life? He's very resourceful, right? He's in a I don't know, a dungeon or a cave or whatever, and he's there to get an idol, right? And the idol's on a pedestal, and he's got a little bag of Skittles or rocks with him or something, and he weighs out the bag to make sure it's the same weight as the idol. He takes the idol off, he puts the bag on it, right? But it's just not right. And then, of course, the pedestal drops, and all hell breaks loose. But we are establishing his character through that action. He's resourceful. He's a good archaeologist. Then, in the next action beat, he's trying to get out of that cave as it's falling apart all around him. And he's got a guide with him, right? And they reach a point where they have to jump over a chasm, and the guide is with him, and he trusts the guide to help him, and the guide double crosses him. So we established that Indiana Jones is probably trustful to a fault. So we established that about him in the first 5 minutes. But he does escape. He tumbles out of the cave. He's in the grass outside the cave, and he looks up, and who's standing over him? A gentleman from France by the name of Belloc. And Belloc says to him, as we will discover later in the film, he's one of the antagonists, Belloc says, "Ah, we meet again, Dr. Jones, and again I take something from you." In those 9 words, it's about 9 words, we set up backstory, current conflict, and we're foreshadowing the future because he will take something else from Indy later, mainly Marion. That's great movie writing. How many of you watching that movie would go, "Oh my God, he just set up the entire movie"? Of course not, because you're enthralled. And you're like thinking, "Ooh, Harrison Ford. Oh, this movie wouldn't have been as good with Sylvester Stallone. Tom Selleck, no way, ugh." Right? You're not even thinking. You're just lost in the movie and in the character. So what I'm going to do for you tonight is ruin watching the first 10 minutes of every film you watch from here on out. My 18-year-old daughter, I'll never forget, when she's about 9, we went to go see Spy Kids. And yeah, 10 minutes in the movie, she leans over, she's like, "Hey, Dad, that was the inciting incident." I'm like, "Oh my God, I've created a monster." And she has been that to this day. So, action, character. You want the beginning of the movie to be the promise of the end. You're also probably setting up subplots. Everybody knows there's an A story, which is the main character's story, and then there are subplots, B, C, D, E stories. Those all serve to complicate the main plot, but also they also carry the larger theme of the movie. And one of our examples tonight, you'll see, expertly sets up every storyline in the movie. Okay? All right? What else do you think would be a good hook? Yes?
Quick question about subplots. Is there an average number of subplots
No.
that's good to have, or you just...
I didn't mean to cut you off, but no. Here's the one thing. I'm going to give you these guidelines just for the first 10 minutes, obviously. But there's no, like for example, sometimes, and we get criticized at UCLA for this, because we do teach a very specific paradigm, and our graduates have done very well for themselves, so I would argue it works. But there's some people who are critical of us because, like I would argue within the first 5 minutes, we should understand character and possibly situation and problem. And then 10 minutes into the movie, there's an inciting incident, something that happens that upsets the norm, changes everything. Then usually about 20 minutes in, we present the central question. And then the character reacts to that central question. The end of Act 1 usually happens around 30, where they make a choice. They either embrace pursuing the central question or they don't. How many times do they don't? Never, because the movie would be over, right? The shortest movie ever made. Okay? That's a first act. Those moments exist in most first acts that you'll watch. It all probably started with the aforementioned Jaws. Okay? Jaws, I think, is the film that created this modern structural paradigm. Okay? And then Act 2 is where every good movie goes to die. Why is that? Because Act 2 is twice as long as Act 1. Hard to write. Majority of people in Hollywood who make a living as writers spend about 80% of their time getting paid to rewrite other people's scripts. It's good business, but it also can be frustrating because usually your name never gets on the movie and a whole line of things. That's usually 30 to 90. And there's 3 major plot points within those 60 pages. Then 90 is our low point. End of Act 2, we're furthest away from answering the central question. And then your third act can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 45 minutes, depending on the type of movie. If you've seen The Sixth Sense, how many of you have seen The Sixth Sense? Because I want to give it away for anybody who hasn't seen it, because there is a little bit of a twist at the end. But the third act in The Sixth Sense is about 1.5 minutes long. He basically goes home, sees his wife passed out on the couch watching a wedding video. I'm going to give it away. And he realizes he's dead. And that's it, the movie's over. But what's important about that end, I'll go back to beginning of the movie, promise of the end, In the beginning of the movie, for those of you who've seen it, and those of you who haven't, you should. It's a great movie. He and Bruce Willis's character and his wife are celebrating. He's won some award, and they're celebrating, and they've had a couple drinks, and they're a little tipsy, and she's reading the plaque that he won, and she says, you know, the Philadelphia Child Psychologists Union gives the Psychologists of the Award year award to Bruce Willis, or whatever his name is, Malcolm, I think, in the movie. And she says, while she's reading that, she says, even though many times he treated his wife as if she were second best, that's exactly what she says when she's kind of chiding him for winning. And then what are the last words that Malcolm says in the movie? He says to her, as she's passed out on the couch, you were never second best. Beginning of the movie, promise of the end. See how important those first 10 minutes are? I just gave you 4 examples of where you set it up and you pay it off. And here's the thing, and this is why screenwriting is really hard. Everything is a setup for something later. Everything. And what I hear from new writers all the time is, well, how do I know what's going to happen later? I'm like, let me pull out my crystal ball. No, it's all about setups and payoffs, which means you are writing multiple drafts. That first draft is just your vomit draft. You just want to get it out there. Then you're going to go back, and you're going to address, build, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so again, opening 10, some kind of action. It could be a character. Whatever it is, the beginning of the movie should be the promise of the end. Hopefully or possibly we're setting up some subplots. You see it okay?
Okay.
Right on. I can take a picture of it for it too if you want. Another thing that we want to set up is the tone. This is important. I can't tell you how many comedy scripts I've read that aren't funny. I gotta laugh, right? I mean, comedy is also very subjective and it's hard. I can't tell you how many romantic scripts I've read that aren't very romantic. I can't tell you how many action scripts I've read where in the first 10 minutes there's no action. Right? Okay? So hopefully you're setting the tone of the story. Another thing you have to set up is the world. Not only the larger world, but also the character's world. And those are 2 different things. How many of you have seen Sex and the City? Everybody's like, yay. Yeah, the show and, well, at least the first movie. The second one was a money grab. Has there been more than 2? I think there's 2. Yeah, exactly. Why do you think the second Sex and the City movie doesn't work? Because it doesn't take place in New York. They go like to the Middle East or something. It's like, what? That makes sense. Sex and the City would be a completely different show and a completely different movie, no offense to anybody from Iowa, if it took place in Des Moines, right? They'd be hanging out at Applebee's, eating unlimited apps, right? New York is a character in the movie. Jaws, it's purposely set in Amityville, right? Confused it with the Amityville Horror. What's that? Thank you. Jaws doesn't work if it's Lake Michigan, right? The world is important. And it takes place at a certain time that's important too. 4th of July weekend, the biggest weekend for that town. See how that all adds to the conflict in the story? Okay? So you want to set up not just the physical world, but also the character's world. So for example, one of the films we're going to watch, the first 10 minutes of, one of my favorite movies from last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was this year, I don't know, what month are we in? It's a crazy world we live in now. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And surprisingly, I just did a seminar at Disney, and that was basically all the animators at Disney's favorite movie from last year. I was like, something wrong with that equation, as it's not a Disney film. But what they do brilliantly in that film, as we'll see, is they set up not only the main character's world, his personal world, but also the world of the movie. Okay? Moonlight, same thing. We set up characters. The place is a character. The neighborhood is a character. It has certain types of characters within it. It creates conflict. Okay? Let's see, what else do we need to do in those first 10 minutes? We should, at the end of it, have our inciting incident. And that inciting incident is the thing that changes the norm. So for example, how many of you have seen Thelma and Louise? Yeah, some of you? Okay. The inciting incident is Thelma and Louise leave on vacation. It changes their life, right? If they never go on vacation, they never end up in that bar, and one of them doesn't get raped in the parking lot, story doesn't exist. The central question of Thelma and Louise, which you can all imagine based on what I just said, is they decide to run after they shoot that guy. So the central question is, will they get caught? And then the rest of the movie is progressive steps to answering that central question. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the inciting incident being when they went on the trip or when it turned, when the big, incident occurred.
No, because that happens around 15, 16 in. That's because if she doesn't get raped,
Right.
they don't run.
I would have said that's the inciting incident, so I'm just curious why you.
Yeah, so in my opinion, inciting incident is usually 10 and it upsets the norm. And then that inciting incident makes the central question possible.
So you're calling the central question the
Happens around 20, and that's when you state the plot. That's when the plot is presented. You'll see. I'll make it clear for you in some of the samples. Any other questions? Yes?
Are these bullet points applicable for nonfiction as well? Or are we just focused on fiction right now? Or
How do you mean by nonfiction? You mean documentaries?
no, like I guess honed nonfiction, like based on true events.
Oh, so biopics.
Sure.
Yeah, all the rules apply.
They also apply.
Yep. I'm producing a movie right now about a guy named Michael Bricklin who brought the Yugo to America. Anybody in here mature enough to remember the Yugo? Because one thing I've discovered in pitching that movie to younger people this week is that younger people have never heard of the Yugo. Thank you very much, young lady. The Yugo was a car built in Yugoslavia. It was a piece of junk, but you could sit, I think the entry price was $19.95. $1,995, right? It was a good entry-level car. What is intriguing about that character, it's a real guy, real story, is he's one of those guys who everything he touches turns into shit, but he comes out smelling like a rose. Those type of people are very intriguing to me. Teflon type of folks that no matter what kind of shit they get in, they can walk out smelling like a rose. So, 17-minute point in that screenplay as it exists right now, our main character decides to help Michael Bricklin bring the Yugo to America. And the central question is, will the Yugo sell in America? Will they succeed? A movie that we had a hand in at least the beginning of it, but then kind of fell out of the picture later, is a great film called Pirate Radio, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman. Pirate Radio is the true story of a guy named Roy Bates, British guy, who started pirate radio in Britain in the 60s. For those of you who don't know what pirate radio was, in Britain at that time, the government ran the airwaves in terms of what music could be played. So Roy Bates decided that he was going to start his own radio station, hence they called it Pirate Radio, right? Well, the government tried to shut it down. So he took his family and his operation and moved them out onto a gunnery platform in the English Channel that was built during World War II. They built a bunch of them to shoot down Nazi airplanes. The government still tried to shut him down, so he declared it a country. Sealand. It is the world's smallest sovereign nation. They have their own money, their own passports, their own stamps. Roy declared himself the Prince of Sealand, his wife the Princess. True story. The central question of that film is, will he create Sealand? Okay? Now, the other thing to keep in mind when it comes to biopics is your job is to entertain, not educate. Because so many times, he's like, write that down. Let me tell you, I get pitched thousands of biopics. What is Life Worth, the movie I mentioned before, it is a biopic. It's about a real life guy named Ken Feinberg. Asshole New York lawyer, after 9/11, got patriotic, decided to do something for the country, so he volunteered to be the special master of the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. Not the one that Jon Stewart's been in the news about lately, but rather one where they gave financial awards, I hate to use the word awards, compensation to the families of victims of the collapse of the Twin Towers. So if you were a stockbroker in one of the Twin Towers and you're 40 years old and you made $1 million a year, they would basically use a life insurance actuary table to determine how much money they would give your family. Problem is, I'm pitching you the movie here, problem is he treated all the transactions with the family as if they were business transactions and turned everybody off. Problem with that was if you didn't sign up for the fund, you retained your rights to sue the airlines, and the government was worried that the civil aviation industry would collapse under the weight of lawsuits. Ultimately, in a homage to Aaron Brockovich, he got 96% of the families to sign up for the fund, but that's not what's important. What's important is in the process of determining what other people's lives are worth, he discovered what his own life is worth. There, I just pitched you a major motion picture starring Stanley Tucci and Michael Keaton. I did it in about a minute, but you saw that whole movie, right? In fact, I gave you Act 1, I gave you Act 2, and I gave you Act 3. And I told you the character's arc. We could do a whole nother workshop about that. I've also been pitching that movie for 14 years. So, my mailman knows the pitch. My bud tender knows the pitch. Everybody knows the pitch. That's a true story. Is everything in the movie true? No. In Pirate Radio, in real life, his family supported him and would go anywhere with him. Why is that not a very good movie? That's boring. There's no conflict. Nobody wants to watch people agree. My old boss at UCLA, Richard Walter, he used to always say, nobody wants to see a movie about the village of the happy people, right? I mean, what if in Jaws, at the beginning of the movie, everybody's like, well, you know, I kind of understand that the shark was hungry. Maybe we shouldn't go after the shark. And everybody else is like, I agree. Well, what's the movie, right? Conflict is key. Conflict, conflict, conflict. Sometimes you have to make shit up for better conflict. You good?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you had another question. Okay. All right. Can you think of anything else that you want in the first 10 minutes? Yay. Very good. Yes, you would like, and again, these are all guidelines. They're not going to be in every single movie you see. Some of them may be in one, some of them may be in another. The perfect ones have them all. But yeah, are we establishing the theme? Everybody understand what a theme is? Want is story. Theme is need. So in other words, I want to blank, and that's my plot, and by pursuing blank, I realize what I need, and that's theme. Theme is emotion, plot is story. The biggest problem I find in most new writers' scripts is the scripts aren't about anything other than the action of the movie. That's okay. But you'd like, ooh, paparazzi, you'd like to have a theme. What's the point of the movie? Right? Make sense? And that usually differentiates the amateur scripts from the professional scripts. For example, our film Black and Blue that's coming out, did I mention October 25th at a theater near you? Stars Naomi Harris from Moonlight. It also stars Tyrese and so many other people. It's the story of a young black woman in New Orleans who is a rookie police officer. You probably already understand where I'm headed with this idea. Black and blue. She's black. The police wear blue. The whole movie, there's a very simple plot. I'll tell you the plot. Won't give it away. Her partner's, she's a rookie cop. Her partner's crooked. Her body cam videotapes him killing a drug suspect. Now she's on the run because the crooked cop and the drug dealers want to get her and get that body cam footage and destroy it before she gets back to the station to upload it. Nobody come at me with they wirelessly upload shit all the time. All right? We're just going to forget that. I know, half of you are like, well, my brother's a cop and they continually upload the footage to, yeah, that doesn't exist in this world. She's on the run. She's got 24 hours to get the footage back to the station. Really simple story. right? Super simple story. What that movie is really about is community and where you belong and what's your purpose in life. Because her whole struggle is she black or is she blue? Now that sounds really heavy, and it's not that heavy in the movie, but it's a huge thing in the movie. And if you watch the trailer, it hits it like a sledgehammer. In fact, there's this amazing shot of her walking down the street from behind, and she's wearing a black jacket, and she takes it off. Look, see, I'm getting goosebumps just saying it. She takes it off, and it's blue. She's got her blue uniform on, and it says police on the back. And then the whole struggle is she has to go back to where the community that she left for help, and they won't accept her because now she's blue. She's not black anymore. It's pretty ambitious for a genre pick made for certain audiences. And we're super proud of the movie. It's a fun ride. Look, it's not War and Peace. It's just a fun Saturday movie. Go have 2 margaritas and go watch it. You'll have a great time. Okay? But theme really drove the discussions. That's what I always ask writers. What's the movie really about? What's the point? You know, What Is Life Worth is about a person finding out that money isn't everything. Okay? So what's your point? That'll really elevate your writing. Okay? Can you think of anything else in the first 10? As my voice goes up 5 octaves? I think this is a good place to start. You guys want to watch a couple opening 10s? Yes, please do.
Are there any limits or restraints you would advise for this person?
And what do you mean? Like what?
Maybe making the world too out of the norm?
Oh gosh, no. The more original, the better. You were there last night, Chad. We were talking about Don't Fade Away Funny Man.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I just wanted can you see the screen okay?
Absolutely.
Awesome, cool. Oh, you bet, no problem. As I lose it.
However, you did mention that movie didn't get made, so.
Yeah, no, but here's the thing. Okay, now I got to backtrack a little bit, and that's okay. It's good. Chad's referencing the lecture I did at University of Tampa last night, and asking about, we talked about what we did there last night, which was a lot of fun, is I asked what their favorite and least favorite movies were, and then we talked about the differences between them. And it's pretty funny what you see on a favorite side and what you see on the least favorite side. And one of the things that we came up with is that the ones that were favorites felt original and fresh and different. So then I told that group the story of my friend Steve Bagatorian, who's a professional writer. He wrote the Tupac biopic called All Eyez on Me, which is not a good movie, and he'll be the first to admit it, but that's a whole nother story. But the script that he wrote that got him into the business of making movies was a script called Don't Fade Away Funny Man, which is a story of a comic that tells a joke that starts World War III. Comedy is outlawed around the world. All the comics of the world have to go into hiding. They move underground. They create their own society underground where they then wait for their savior to appear and bring them back to justice. That savior appears in the form of a 10-year-old fat kid who doesn't have a sense of humor. Sound like an interesting movie? You ever see that movie before? Not that specific movie, but have you ever seen a movie about a comic that tells a joke that starts World War III? Yeah. Seriously? Balls out. Do everything you can to impress me. Seriously, don't hold back. Now, I'm also impressed by very small, intimate moments. I just read a script recently where the opening image is a pair of old, withered hands doing a very complex ponytail of someone's hair. And those hands evolve or morph into the hands of a 7-year-old girl tying her own ponytail. And right away, I'm hooked. I'm like, who are these people? How do they connect? And they will connect. So it's another thing I would add to this. So perfect question, Chad. I would add to this, what's the need to know? How many of you have seen Silence of the Lambs? Yeah. Here's how I watch Silence of the Lambs. From behind the wall in the kitchen. Great movie. We open on Jodie Foster running through the woods, right? She's training. She's wearing that iconic FBI sweatsuit that says FBI on the back in case you want to know what she does for a living. And then she gets told that she has to go down into the dungeon of the police station or prison or wherever they are to deal with Hannibal Lecter, right? Played by Anthony Hopkins. And everybody's like, ooh, he's a monster. Look out for him. He's the worst. Thank God it's you and not me, right? So right away we're like, oh shit, he's gonna be this monster, right? And then we get down there and he's like, you know, your neighbor wearing his little jumpsuit and he's all groomed and he's a very polite British gentleman. And you're like, what the? So I wanna know. That creates a need to know for me. I'm like, why is everybody so afraid of this guy? Mystery, it's all about mystery. Not confusion. Those are two different things. Okay? That answer your question? Go all out. You got 10 pages to grab me. But I get grabbed by, this doesn't sound right. I get grabbed by a lot of different things. You know?
I watched that movie.
And the other thing is taste, right? Everybody's tastes are different too. So, like, I'm not a fan of horror films, even though I am very good friends with the guys who wrote A Quiet Place. I'm a chicken shit. I appreciate the fact that Saw probably has one of the best opening 10 minutes in a movie in a long time, for those of you who've seen it. Anybody seen Saw? Yeah, what is it? Two guys wake up in a room chained to a toilet or something, right? And you're like, what the? That's a hook, right? Now again, but don't get me wrong, because I know there's different strokes for different folks, and there's some people in here who wouldn't get caught dead seeing that movie or writing that movie. That's okay. I'm going to show you another film tonight, one of my favorite movies called In Bruges. Has anybody seen In Bruges? Amazing movie. Nothing happens in those first 10 minutes, but it sets up everything. Okay? How are we doing on time? We're good. Any other questions before we start? Okay, so the first one we're going to take a look at is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Anybody not seen that movie? Shame on all of you. It was produced by Lord and Miller. For those of you familiar with them, they did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and they did the Lego movies, which the first Lego movie is one of my favorite movies as well. Then they were famously fired from the Han Solo movie. Good for them. And now they've made Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. There's been a ton of Spider-Man movies, right? Some of you who are Marvel junkies or DC junkies probably know that whole story. This is a total reimagining of the Spider-Man story. It's an animated film, and we're going to watch about the first 10 or 11 minutes, and I want you to be looking for those things that we talked about, okay? There's no foul language, so hopefully it's family friendly for y'all. And hopefully this will work, as I'm sure it will. If I can just get my computer to come back up. All right, everybody ready? Now the first minute or so that doesn't count in the first 10, but it's good for you to see it anyway, because what they've so expertly done is in the first 2 seconds that this is not your average Spider-Man movie with what they do in the credits. Now, you don't write the credits, okay? I know you've all seen a credit sequence that adds to the story, maybe even foreshadows a lot of things, but you don't write that. There's actually outside production companies that's what they do, is once a film is made, they come in and pitch the credit sequences and design the credit sequences. So you would never write a credit sequence in your script. In fact, if you do write a credit sequence in your script, it screams that you're an amateur. So don't do it, okay? Whatever, it's a great movie. It's one of the best movies of last year. And what they did so brilliantly is they took something that was old and made it feel new, right? This is what I tell new writers all the time. Take something old and flip it, As I said last night, take an old John Hughes movie and change the gender of the protagonist. Update it. Hollywood is looking for stuff that's familiar, but just a little bit different. But what have we done? Let's look at our thing over here. So what's our hook? How do we hook the audience? We hook the audience with Peter Parker, right? I'm Spider-Man, right? The tone of the story, completely different, right? It's irreverent, sorry. It's irreverent, right? He's making fun of himself. He's self-deprecating. He's like, I got a line of cereal, which then Dad says, you know, when he's complaining about Spider-Man 5 minutes later, he's like, yeah, he comes out wearing that mask and doing all that shit. But I do kind of like the cereal. Everything's a setup for a payoff. So we introduce Peter Parker, we establish the world, we establish the rules of the world. He's a guy who has saved the world over and over again. And then he says at the end of the 2 minutes, for the last 10 years, I've been the only Spider-Man saving the world, right? And then boom, we cut to Miles. Miles is the least likely person we would ever expect to be the next Spider-Man, right? He's a kid, he's a little rebellious. Why is he rebellious? Because his dad's a cop. And his dad and his parents send him off to some kind of boarding school, right? So he's already pissed, okay? So remember we had to establish the world, we established the larger world, and then we established Miles's world. And Miles's world, he lives in a multicultural family that they're loving and they care for each other. In fact, his dad says you got to say I love you in front of him. What do you think the end of the movie is? That family comes back together. But they are torn apart as well. I don't want to give it away, but I'll tell you this. There's a big twist with the uncle. The uncle is not who he appears to be. I just ruined the twist, sorry. But, okay, so we meet Miles in his world, right? And we establish that he's rebellious, right? He sticks his stickers all over town, all that kind of stuff, right? He's also popular. All the other kids are like, hey, we miss you. You remember when he's walking down the street? You may not have heard it. We had a little bit of a glitch with the sound. But as he's walking down the street, somebody says to him, hey, did you feel that earthquake last night? And he says, no, the earthquake is important, comes back. It turns out it's the disturbance in the time-space continuum. And it turns out that this movie actually takes place in 5 different universes, i.e. Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. There are 5 different Spider-Verses, one that Spider-Ham exists in, one that Spider-Noir exists in, very brilliantly played by Nick Cage, of all people. There's also Peter Parker's universe. Spider-Ham is played by John Mulvaney, he's hilarious in it. And then there's Spider-Girl, who we met in the school. We don't know she's Spider-Girl yet, but she's also a spider person, Spider-Girl, okay? So, we establish character, situation, and problem within the first 5 minutes. The character is Miles. His situation is he has to go to a boarding school. His problem is what? What's that?
He hates it.
Well, he hates it, but more specifically, he just got bit by a spider. And that's our inciting incident. It's not the central question. It's not the plot. Remember, we're setting up the ordinary here. What's Miles' extraordinary going to be? He's going to be Spider-Man, right? What do they slyly do? Again, everything's a setup for something later. When he goes with his uncle down into the subway station to tag, Miles can't climb over the fence. That's a setup for him later. He's going to be leaping off of 100-story tall buildings. Another big thematic thread is Great Expectations. He's forced to read the book Great Expectations and write a novel, write a paper about it. What is his tag? No, it said no expectations. That's rich shit. For a silly animated Spider-Man movie, that's pretty deep stuff. You got to admire it for that. Yeah.
Well, it also reminds me of the fact that it's the hero's journey.
Yep.
He comes back.
Oh, totally. Yeah, everything is a hero's journey. We're setting up his ordinary, and then that leap into Act 2 is going to be the jump into the extraordinary world. Yeah, totally. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you find it important to demonstrate contrast in a character? Like, for example, he couldn't climb over the fence as a way to tease where it's going to go?
Yeah. Yeah, you always want to set up a character's weakness. That's not a flaw, that's just a weakness. A physical attribute is not a flaw. Yeah, everything's a setup for a payoff. So, you know, again, the casual moviegoer is going to watch that and they just think, oh, it's funny, he can't climb over the fence, but it's totally setting up a ton of other stuff. The tying of the shoe, right? He doesn't tie his shoe. I can't tell you how many times he trips into situations in this movie. But what does he say? It's a choice. Because the whole movie is about choices and the choices you make and how they affect you. So again, tiniest things actually play out really huge. And I can feel all of you right now going, I can't do this. You can do it. This is an expertly crafted script. It's an amazing screenplay. Yes, sir?
Would it be in Indiana Jones thing, I hate snakes?
Yeah, I mean, Indy doesn't really have a flaw.
Right.
You know.
Just the idea that he hates snakes.
Yeah, he hates snakes.
Or we got to get a bigger boat.
Yeah, Indy has two problems. He's afraid of snakes, and he's pretty lousy at relationships, right? And then what do? We team him up with his ex-girlfriend to go on the adventure, right? And then at the midpoint of that movie, which is the whole second act thing, which is not what we're talking about tonight, but at the midpoint, usually you force your protagonist to deal with what they need, right? The whole first half is going after what you want. The midpoint, you suddenly start to realize what you need based on what you've been going after in terms of what you want. And at the midpoint of Raiders, what happens? Indy has to face the two things he's most afraid of, which is snakes and Marion when they're trapped in that pit together. And the first half of the movie, they've been working against each other. The second half, they work together. So, I mean, again, Indiana Jones is an arc, because if not, then we couldn't have 47 Indiana Jones movies, right? And this is an important thing to keep in mind too. If you learned one thing tonight, movies are about watching characters become something, not be something. Two wildly different things. It's the reason why almost every origin story works and why every sequel sucks. Because think about The Matrix. The first one's brilliant, probably one of the best movies of the last 50 years. It's really cool, and it also opened up a new ground in terms of storytelling, and that movie's all about Neo becoming Neo. Once he's Neo, it's no longer interesting, because he could just fly away. Why do the 10-minute kickboxing sequence? You could just fly. Leave, right? So your movie is about somebody becoming something, always. He's becoming Spider-Man. And actually, what he also does is he teaches Peter Parker how to reinvent himself as Spider-Man too. Because if you watch the movie, you see that Spider-Man, because his girlfriend broke up with him, has kind of let himself go. So he's this project. So we've set up characters, situation, problem. We've set up every subplot in this movie almost. We set up his relationship with his dad. We set up his relationship with his uncle, who turns out to be a villain. We set up his relationship with Spider-Girl. And we actually introduced one of the other antagonists too. For those of you who've seen it, it's the woman in the video that they're showing in the class, Dr. Olivia. She is Spock Ock. She's a villain. You don't know that watching the first 10 minutes, but about 25 minutes later, she shows up and she's the bad guy. One of the bad guys. There's 3 bad guys. Notice we haven't even met the antagonist yet. We don't know who the bad guy is in the movie. Make sense? Yes, sir.
So a subplot, I'm thinking might be that he's resisting what he could become in school. He's got a school teacher that doesn't allow him to go that direction. So she says, no, this is what you could become.
Right.
And then he eventually becomes Spider-Man.
Yep. But that's the theme, and that teacher is not a subplot story. She never appears in the movie again.
Well, another subplot is the uncle, right? We're setting the uncle up.
Yeah. So I said dad, uncle, Spider-Girl, and then Peter Parker, because it becomes a buddy movie. Miles teams up with Peter Parker to become Spider-Man. So we've done a lot. We've set up the world, right? We've not only the larger world, but the character world. We've set up the theme, which is expect something from yourself, right? We've set the tone right off the bat, right? I mean, I did a Christmas special. I had a popsicle. It's funny, right? It's tongue in cheek. The beginning of the movie is totally the promise of the end. We've set up the characters really clearly. We have that inciting incident, which is him getting bit by a spider, right? And we hook the audience. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Can a character raise a question or something, but then never appear again?
Sure.
Do they have to always be connected, or?
No. No, you can have a one-off character. The thing about subplots is there's more important subplots than others. So we use the idea that the main story is the A story. So Miles becoming Spider-Man is the A story. The B story is Miles' relationship with Peter Parker. The C story is Miles' relationship with Spider-Girl. The D story is Miles' relationship with his uncle. The E story is Miles' relationship with Spider-Ham. The F story is Miles' relationship with Spider-Nor. So that's A, B, C, D, E, F. That's 7 subplots. They all should have a beginning, middle, and an end. Some are going to have more scenes than others. They always carry the thematic thread. What you discover as you watch this movie is everybody that Miles deals with, they all have great expectations of him. Yeah. It's crazy. Brilliantly crafted script. That's why these guys get movies made, and it's why they're multi-billionaires, and it's why they will direct a Star Wars movie at some point. They're great. It's a great script. Lord and Miller, Phil Lord and Chris Miller. They did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, both the Lego movies. Like I said, they were directing the Han Solo movie, but they got fired. And now this movie, they're already making a sequel to this movie. I can tell you a story, but this movie was actually directed by 3 people. And one of the directors had been an animator around town for 30 years, and then he finally got a chance to direct a movie. And it's really funny. It just shows you how small the world is. I was teaching an undergraduate lecture class at UCLA with 500 undergrads in it. Yeah, that's fun. And the last night, we're talking about relationships and how to create relationships and, and hold relationships and build relationships. And one young woman in the class raised her hand and she said, "My dad is the classic story of what you just talked about." And I said, "Why? Who's your dad?" And she said, "One of the directors of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse." And I'm like, "You're just now telling me that? Why didn't you tell me that week 1? We brought his ass in and talked to the class." He has since come to classes. And she's like, "Yeah, it took him 30 years. He was a grinder, worked on a lot of movies as an animator, and finally got his opportunity." What's that tell you? Never give up. You never know what could happen. Okay? Any questions about that, what we just looked at? Wow, I'm impressed. Yeah.
Throw everything in there?
Do what?
The whole entire list. Is that whole entire list covered in the first 10 minutes? And when you see that in the script, is that annoying, or is that like,
Well,
oh, this is rudimental, or following every rule, like this makes sense? I mean, I guess it makes sense if it is written well, but
it's my wet dream. It would not annoy me at all. No, I would be like, look, I read the first 10 pages of the script, I'm in. I buy it. I empathize with Miles. I like the humor. I appreciate the fact they've set up the larger issue in the movie. We still don't know what the plot is. The plot is, for those who haven't seen the movie, there's this guy, I think it's called Blockhead, and he's huge, and he's got a blockhead. What's that? Kingpin, that's it, Kingpin. Sorry. Blockhead's a better name. But his name's we haven't even met him yet. But it turns out Kingpin's wife and son left him, And he's obsessed with getting them back, which makes him a great villain because there's an emotional component to his evilness. And what he is trying to do is, I'm going to butcher this, but he's got a machine that he's using to create new dimensions because he's trying to get back to the dimension where he was together with his wife and kid. That's super sympathetic. Problem is, he's the villain. So the classic definition of a villain is someone who takes it too far. So I always use this analogy. And when it comes to creating movie characters, in real life, we go to our favorite restaurant, In-N-Out, Burger, whatever. We order something, we get the wrong order, but we got it to go, so we don't realize it till we're home. We're pissed, but what do? We send an email to the company and they send us a gift card for 25 bucks. That's what we do in real life. In a movie, if that happened, I'd go back to the restaurant and take everyone in there hostage until I got my menu. That's the difference between R-E-A-L and R-E-E-L. So this guy, he's decided he's going to create a machine that creates new dimensions that can get him back to the dimension where he was happy. How can we root against that? That's actually extremely sympathetic. That's what you want your villain to be, sympathetic. But they always take it too far. Look at Darth Vader. That's one of the most sympathetic characters in all the Star Wars movies. His wife or girlfriend left him. They took her away, something that made him evil. There's an emotional core to the character.
I have a question in regards to the hook.
Yeah.
With my personal perception, I got hooked into the visual color. So is there a way that you can write to do a sensory hook versus a storyline hook?
Yeah, but you wouldn't write, the screen is filled with blues and greens and golds, and what you would write is, this is a crazy ass opening with the wildest visuals you've ever seen.
Or auditory or whatever.
Yeah, but that's not really up to you as the writer. Those are all directorial choices.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you read the script, that's not in the script. But what is in the script, for those of you who have not seen the movie or those of you who have, once he starts to become Spider-Man and the powers are surging through him, suddenly everything on screen looks like it's in a comic book. His thought bubbles come out, noises happen. When he punches somebody, it says thwack. It becomes a comic book, and in fact, the visuals are even murky and almost look like you're watching the movie through a screen over a window. And they did that specifically because that's what the pages of a comic book look like.
So you can actually write the visual.
So that you would write.
Okay.
You would write, suddenly the world is murky. It almost looks like we're watching a movie in 3D without 3D glasses because it's the page of a comic book come to life. That's how you would write that in the script. Again, you can't tell people what to do in the script. You can hint at what we're seeing. Just like, I read character descriptions all the time that drive me bonkers. Like Susie, 5'7", 125 pounds. She wears jeans and a tight white t-shirt. Her hair is 3/4 of an inch longer than blah, blah, blah. No, what you write is Susie, 27, works her way through the room. If bowling alley cocktail waitresses had a spokesmodel, she'd be it. How many of you have been to a bowling alley? How many of you ordered a drink from a bowling alley cocktail waitress? You get my point. Or bartender, whatever you want to say. Paint a picture, suggest, don't dictate. Turns people off.
Can you ever say, like, it's a Shirley MacLaine type or something like that?
I recommend, I mean, you see different things, but I recommend to not reference real people in a screenplay. Because if you write, he's a cross between George Clooney and, Topher Grace. I don't know where that came from. I think because you said Topher last night in the car. Right away I'm going, Topher, what a name, what a jerk. Like, why can't he just go by Christopher? Oh my, but he was really good in BlacKkKlansman. I'm suddenly no longer in your movie. Yeah, you want me to get lost in the world of your script. And the minute you start mentioning the real world, I'm no longer lost in your script. Plus you run the risk of, let's say my wife left me for George Clooney. I better call her. Yes, sir.
Can an ensemble
Yeah.
Have to be that.
Sure. But usually you want one character to have the highest stakes within the ensemble. So like Diner, one of my favorite movies. Group of guys, it all takes place on the weekend before one guy is going to get married. The guy who's getting married has the most at stake, but everybody else is in the movie. This is an ensemble piece. I mean, he ultimately ends up with Peter Parker, Spider-Ham, Spider-Norn, Spider-Girl. There's 5 of them, or 4 of them. Or...
The anime one with the machine.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that one too. So there are 5. I jokingly said it's a 5-hander. You know, when we say 2-hander, it's 2 characters together. But Miles has the most at stake. It's Miles' movie. You know, I mean, Sixth Sense is a classic movie, and it's a classic character. And for those of you who've seen The Sixth Sense, the theme is communication. And you want everybody to be struggling with the thematic thread of the movie. So everybody has that same problem. It's just like when you think of American Beauty, everybody's having some form of midlife crisis in that movie. They're all struggling with their identity. It's no mistake, DVDs that Kevin Spacey's character borrows from The Kid Next Door is the Reanimator series. Because everyone in the movie is reanimating themselves. They're becoming different people, the people they were meant to be. That's not an accident. Okay? Any other questions about this? I'd like to watch one more if we have the time.
Does this formula fit any kind of movie?
I'm going to show you a completely different one right now. Thank you for your questions. Those are all great questions. So now what I thought we'd do, if it's cool with everybody, and maybe I'll turn on the subtitles because it's kind of a quiet movie, but I'm going to show you the first 10 minutes of a movie called In Bruges. Stars, I always get these guys confused. Help me out. Somebody who's seen the movie. Who's the star? Colin Farrell. I always want to call him Will Ferrell. Colin Farrell and the guy from Harry Potter. Whoops, sorry kids. Sorry. It's a great, no, not Daniel Radcliffe. Although that would be an interesting one. In Bruges, here, I'll even just read it to you here. After a job goes wrong in London, 2 hitmen are ordered to lay low at a bed and breakfast in Bruges, Belgium until their boss contacts them. That sounds like the most boring movie on the planet. Brendan Gleeson, thank you very much.
Can you make sure you expand it?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm new at this technology thing. It's a great film. It was nominated for a Writers Guild Award. Martin McDonagh, for those of you who've seen 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, same writer-director. He is an Irish playwright. He also made a movie called Calvary, which a lot of people haven't seen, but I would highly recommend it. It's a great movie. But literally, this movie is about 2 hitmen who perform a hit that went wrong, and now they're sent to Bruges to wait for instructions from their boss. So let's watch the first 10 or 12 minutes, and we can compare it to Spider-Man. Is there a hook? Yeah, the hook is the voiceover. Somebody asked about voiceover earlier. The hook is the voiceover, and he says, you know, after I killed him, I cleaned my prints off the gun and I threw it in the river. And then, you know, they told us to go to Bruges. You know, Bruges, I don't even know where the fuck that is. And then he says, by the way, it's in Belgium. All right? So right away we know that they've killed somebody, or he has killed somebody, the Colin Farrell character, right? What we come to discover is, for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm gonna give it away, his job was to kill a priest, and he was in a confessional, the Colin Farrell character. He was in a confessional and he shot the priest, but the bullet actually went through the priest and killed a little boy that was in the church. Yeah, so you're extremely sympathetic to him when you find that out, because it was a mistake. It was an accident. They are there on a job. The job is Harry, their boss, brilliantly played by Ralph Fiennes, has sent them there for the Brendan Gleeson character to kill Colin Farrell. So they are there on a job. And he even says at the 10-minute point, we might be here on a job. The inciting incident is they are there on a job. The center question, 10 minutes later, gets presented when Harry calls and tells the Brendan Gleeson character to kill Colin Farrell. So the center question becomes, will he kill him? We foreshadowed all of that. What was the sight or the shot in the top of the bell tower where he pretended to shoot him? Mind you, he doesn't know yet. He hasn't gotten the call yet.
He's killing him. He's killing the character that he's sent to kill.
Yeah. Brendan Gleeson, the older character, is going to be forced to kill Colin Farrell's character. Their boss calls him and tells him to kill him. That's why he sent them to Bruges.
And he's imagining that he's killing him.
Yeah, because he hates him. This is a movie about two guys becoming friends. And the backdrop is one of them has to kill the other and he doesn't know it. The Colin Farrell character doesn't know it. Everything's a setup for a payoff. The coins, it's a funny bit, right? Later, 75 minutes from now, Brendan Gleeson is going to be up on that bell tower again, and Harry, the Ralph Fiennes character, their boss, is about to kill Colin Farrell in the courtyard below. Brendan Gleeson's character takes all those coins out of his pocket and throws them down out of the bell tower so the area will clear, and he jumps to his death. Sorry. He does that to protect Colin Farrell. You get choked up just thinking about it. It's a great movie. It's a brilliant movie. Yeah. Laugh at the teacher. That's what you want people. No, I know. That's what you're all doing tonight when you go home. I would suggest you watch it with the subtitles on because you can't understand half the shit they say. Ralph Fiennes is brilliant in this movie. It's amazing. And they all act on a code, the killer's code. If you kill someone you weren't supposed to kill, you have to die. So they're living by a code, so we can't root against them. We're actually rooting for him to kill Colin Farrell, but he doesn't. So we've got tons of setups for payoffs in these first 10 minutes, but most importantly, we have what we call a unity of opposites. We have two characters who have the same goal, which is to hide out in Bruges, but they are wildly different from each other. We've got the older, cultured gentleman, and then we've got Colin Farrell's character, and Colin Farrell is basically a kid. He's a kid throughout the whole movie. There's only one other subplot in this. There's two subplots in this movie. The innkeeper, she's a subplot. She's pregnant for a reason because one of the final shootouts takes place in the lobby of that bed and breakfast. And now Colin Farrell's character is shooting at somebody else with a pregnant woman between them, which again, he's already killed one kid. So that hangs heavy. Then you've got their relationship together. Then the scene right after this, actually Colin Farrell sees they're shooting a movie and one of the characters is a little person and he's super intrigued and he's like, wants to go, he's like, oh, they're filming a movie with midgets. And he runs over and he meets a woman who's working on the movie. She becomes his love interest. And she's a very important character because he actually falls in love with her. And so therefore the stakes are even higher for the audience because if he dies, he's finally found something to live for. And if he's killed, then he loses that. So that's a subplot. It gets introduced in the very next scene, but I cut it off because we're running out of time. But that would be, the inciting incident is, are we here on a job? See how wildly different that is from Spider-Man? It's a completely different movie. Is there a hook? Yeah, it's the voiceover. I killed somebody, I threw the gun in the trash in a Burger King, and then we had to go to Bruges. And then we have that great short scene where the Brendan Gleeson character is like, don't make me bring it up. And Colin Farrell goes into the bathroom and starts to cry. That's our need to know. Here it is in blue, right? What did he do? And why is he so upset by it? That's our need to know. We've set up both the characters are wildly different from each other. Is the beginning of the movie the promise of the end? Hell yeah. At the beginning of the movie, he's pretending to kill him. By the end of the movie, he will kill himself to protect him. Subplots, we've introduced one. There are two more coming. Totally set up the tone of the movie, right? Have we set up the world? Hell yeah. Have we set up the theme? I don't know if we've really set up the theme yet, but that evolves as the movie moves forward. Here's the thing I want you to take away. This is a craft. Writing movies is a craft. There are patterns within films. I've shown you two different, exact same things happen in two wildly different movies. I have ruined movie-going for you forever, because now you'll go home and you'll watch those first 10 minutes and you'll be like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Hopefully for those of you who are writing and pursuing this, this will be helpful to you. But you notice how these are two wildly different movies, yet they all accomplish the same things that we ask a first 10 minutes to accomplish. Make sense? Anybody have any questions? Yes?
Do you recommend before you start writing a script doing bio sketches so that you know who your characters are?
Yep.
And that kind of thing?
Yep. Oh yeah. Biggest mistake I see new writers make is they have no idea who their characters are. You have to create an entire life for them before the movie even starts. What I ask my students to do at UCLA is we make them do an exercise where they write in the character's voice their entire life from the day they were born until the day the story starts. I've had students make photo albums of the character's last vacation. So imagine what Tony Soprano's trip to Disney World would be like. And what pictures would Tony Soprano take at Disney World? Right? You've got to know these characters inside out. So yes, and what I find is everybody's in a hurry. Everybody wants to get rich quick. And so they cut corners. I made the analogy last night at University of Tampa. Talked about character creation. And I'll give you a really quick, gross example. I read a lot of flat characters, really flat characters. So like somebody could say, oh, my main character is an architect. Why is your main character an architect? Oh, because my brother's an architect, so I know how they talk and what they like and what they're into. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really do anything for me. So how about this? What if your main character was an architect and he's actually the country's best designer of custom homes for wealthy people? And the reason why he's obsessed with being the best architect on the planet is because as a kid, he never had a home, or she never had a home. Or maybe it was a single parent household and they were always one step ahead of the rent. So they just moved from place to place to place. So what is that character doing? Creating things for others that she never had for herself. Suddenly that character becomes three-dimensional. They come alive. Which movie would you rather see? That movie or the movie about the architect that likes to wear khakis? See what I mean? You've got to figure out the psychology of the character. And the other thing I'll say is people are afraid to write flawed characters, and there's nothing more boring than to watch movies about perfect people. Every movie is about somebody who is extremely flawed. But why do early drafts not have those flaws in the characters? Take a guess. This is Psychology 101. Because the protagonist is you. It is. It's you. You are not going to sit down and give yourself flaws. You're just not. It's the same reason why there's not a lot of conflict in early drafts, because we as humans avoid conflict like the plague, hopefully. Unless you're my wife. What my wife does every morning for a half hour, this is why I love her, she looks on Twitter and then she calls every politician who said something stupid the day before, calls her office and yells at them. That's a great character. You know my email. If you want to reach out to me with any questions, feel free to, but please, again, don't ask me to read your script. Yes, you may ask the question. I think they're trying to get us out of here too, but no, it's okay. Go ahead. 2 minutes, and then we got to run.
So we got to start with this. I got the Screenwriters Bible. Is that a good thing to look at?
Yeah, it's okay. That's a how-to book. There's lots of how-to books out there. I like books from Linda Seeger, S-E-G-E-R. And the other book I would recommend that you read if you want to be a writer is read Stephen King's On Writing. It's a great book. Oh, I'm sorry, you had a question too. I'll answer it afterwards. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy schedules.